The rain fell lightly on the old roofs of the Charleston orphanage. It was a cold autumn night, the kind when the wind whistles as if it wants to tell a secret. Between the torn sheets of a small bed, a girl with huge eyes whispered into the darkness, "Don't leave me alone." Her voice barely came out, but it seemed to penetrate the icy walls. On the other side, no one answered. Her name was Emily, and she was only 7 years old. Since she'd been left at the orphanage's doorstep, not a single day had passed without dreaming of someone coming to get her. But the years passed, and the sound of footsteps in the hallway was always someone coming to take another child. Never her. Her blanket was too small, and her heart even smaller, but hope, that wouldn't die so easily. Before I continue, I want to say that I ask God to bless you with all his infinite love, giving you much health, peace, joy, and faith, for we can never lose faith in God, for he will never abandon us, for his love is eternal and infinite. I also take this opportunity to ask that you like the video and subscribe to the channel. This helps me a lot, thank you. That night, Emily had heard something different. It wasn't a scream or a cry. It was as if the air had changed. She got up slowly, her bare feet touching the cold floor, and walked to the door. It was ajar. Curious, she peered into the crack, and that was when she saw the shadow, a tall, still figure wearing a strange hat. But when she opened the door, there was no one there. The hallway was empty, silent except for the distant rumble of thunder. Emily went back to bed, her heart pounding. God, if it's you, show me the way. But if not, protect me. And for the first time in a long time, she fell asleep with a strange peace in her chest. Something was coming. She could feel it. The next morning, the orphanage was in an uproar. The headmistress, Mrs. Henderson, was running around with a letter in her hand. "Someone's coming here today," the children whispered, wondering who the lucky one would be this time. Emily wasn't expecting anything. She'd learned that waiting only made things hurt more. But something inside her told her that day would be different. As she combed her fine hair in front of the broken mirror, she felt something warm in her chest. It was the little medal of Our Lady she kept hidden, a gift from the nun who had cared for her as a baby. "Go with faith, my little one," echoed a distant voice in her memory, and Emily smiled without knowing why. At noon, a black car pulled up in front of the rusty gate. It was large, luxurious, unlike anything the children had ever seen. The driver got out first, wearing white gloves and with a firm step. Then the back door slowly opened, and what no one expected happened. A man stepped out, his eyes brimming with tears. He looked directly at Emily. "Oh my God, it's her," he said. Mrs. Henderson's eyes widened. Emily froze. The other children recoiled. The man knelt on the stone floor and opened his arms. "Emily, it's me. I'm your father." The world stopped for a moment. The wind blew harder, and inside her chest, something exploded. Hope mixed with fear. He told her his name was Richard, and that he had been searching for her for years. He said Emily's mother, who had died in an accident, had hidden her existence from him. "I would have come sooner, daughter, if I had known. My heart always knew there was something missing, but not everything made sense." Emily looked at him suspiciously. Why only now? Mrs. Henderson didn't look convinced. "Do you have documents? Do you have proof?" The man handed over a folder filled with papers, old photos, and certificates. There was even a photo of a baby Emily in the arms of a woman who looked just like her. It was so much information at once, it felt like a lie, but the girl's heart, it was beating so loudly you could almost hear it. Meanwhile, one of the caregivers watched from the window. Her face paled. "It can't be. He's back," she whispered to herself. There was something in this story no one there knew, something buried long ago. The caregiver, named Rose, ran to her room and grabbed an envelope hidden behind a picture frame. Her hands trembled. Emily was allowed to spend the weekend with the man. He took her to a large house with a sprawling garden and a playful dog named Cooper. "All this can be yours if you want it," he said with a smile. But that night, as she explored the hallway, she heard a voice. Low, faint, almost a whisper. "Don't trust him." She stopped. She looked around. "Is anyone there?" But there was no one. Only the ticking of the grandfather clock on the wall, and that chill down her spine that sent her running back to her room. She lay down, hugging the teddy bear Richard had bought at the most expensive toy store in town. But now, her doubts were growing more than her joy. The next day, Richard took Emily on a tour of the city. He showed her schools, parks, and bookstores. He told her he owned a company and had many employees. "You'll go to the best schools. You'll have everything you've never had." But a part of Emily missed the nun who made her pray every night. She missed the cold silence of the orphanage. That night, Rose arrived at the mansion's gate. "I need to talk to the girl." Richard refused. He said she wanted to confuse Emily. "She has problems, that woman. Don't listen to her." But Rose didn't give up. She left the envelope with the driver and left, staring at the house as if she knew a secret too old to be forgotten. Emily found the envelope the next day under her bed. Inside was a handwritten letter. "If you're reading this, it means he found you. But be careful. Not everything is as it seems. There's more to this story than he tells you. Follow your heart, and look for the blue doll." Emily frowned. "What doll?" She ran to the attic of the house, where there were a pile of old things. Among boxes and dust-covered furniture, she found a trunk. Inside, a blue doll with sad eyes and a torn dress. Sewn into the dress was a piece of old paper. "Remember the basement? The truth is there." Emily felt a shiver. The basement was always locked. She ran downstairs. The basement had an iron door with a padlock. Richard had said he kept Emily's mother's things there. "Too delicate to be disturbed now," he'd said. But Emily now knew there was something inside that could change everything. She returned to her room with the doll in her arms, and she prayed, "Lord, show me what to do." That night she dreamed of her mother, a beautiful woman with golden hair and a sweet smile. "You are light, my daughter. Never forget that." Emily woke up crying, and she decided she would find out the truth, even if it hurt, even if it changed everything, because now there was something stronger than fear, faith. And as the sun rose over the Charleston skyline, she looked up at the sky and whispered, "Don't leave me alone." But this time it wasn't a cry for help. It was a promise, because something inside her told her the answers were close. Much closer than she imagined. Her name was Margaret, but everyone at the orphanage called her Miss Maggie. Her silver hair was tied back in a tight bun, and she wore woolen dresses even in the summer. Behind her calm gaze there was a storm no one saw. She was firm with the children, but there was something in the way she looked at Emily, something that said, "I've felt this pain too." And perhaps, indeed, she had. Emily was placed in Miss Maggie's care when she fell ill with a high fever. For a week, she slept in a small room inside her house, outside the main orphanage building. That was the first place Emily felt safe, even though she didn't understand why. Maggie sang old hymns while making soup, and she prayed quietly before bed. During those days, Emily dreamed less of her mother and more of warm hands holding hers. Maggie had hands like that, the hands of someone who has lost so much, but still chooses to love. The other caregivers said Maggie was too closed off, that she never shared anything about her life. But once, when Emily asked why she lived alone, Maggie simply said, "Because my heart can't handle losing anyone else." In the 1980s, Maggie had been a nurse at a children's hospital. He had a young daughter named Grace, and they lived in a yellow house downtown. Life was simple, full of apple pies, Sunday services, and afternoons reading. Until one day Grace disappeared, out of nowhere, without a trace. Maggie's world fell apart. She searched everywhere, police, churches, shelters, nothing. No one knew where Grace was. They said maybe someone had taken her, or that she had died. But Maggie never believed it. "As long as I draw breath, I'll wait for her," he said every day, staring out the front window as if the girl would appear there at any moment. The pain was so great that Maggie abandoned everything. Her home, her job, the city. She moved in near the orphanage because, she says, it was the only place where she could still hear children's laughter. There, she began caring for the orphans as if they were echoes of the daughter she had lost. And although she never spoke about it directly, Emily felt it. She felt it in the way Maggie adjusted the sheets. She felt it in the hot tea with honey before bed. The curious thing is that Maggie always kept a locked box in her closet. No one was allowed to touch it. Emily once saw Maggie crying, hugging that box. After that, Maggie became more distant, as if reliving that moment tore her apart. Time passed. Emily grew a little older, but that connection with Maggie never broke. It was as if their hearts shared a similar pain. When Richard showed up claiming to be Emily's father, Maggie didn't react like the others. While everyone else was surprised or excited, she remained silent. Her face turned pale. She looked at Richard as if she were seeing a ghost from the past, and after that she locked herself in the house for 2 whole days. She only reappeared when she learned that Emily was going away for the weekend with him. She went to the orphanage door and asked to speak to Emily, but Mrs. Henderson refused. She said it wasn't time. So Maggie wrote a letter. "If she comes back, let me know. There are things she needs to know." But the letter never reached Emily. Someone hid it, and Maggie, once again, was silenced. But something inside her told her this wasn't the end of her story. On Sunday night, when Emily returned from the mansion, Maggie was waiting for her at the gate. Her eyes were puffy but firm. "Can I give you a hug?" she asked, her voice trembling. Emily ran to her, and in that embrace there was more than affection. There was an unspoken apology, and a love held back for years, finally finding release. That night, Maggie opened the locked box again. Inside was a photo of Grace, her missing daughter. But there was more. A blue teddy bear with the name Gracie embroidered on it, and a carefully folded yellowed piece of paper. When she opened it, Maggie felt the flaw disappear. It was a child's drawing with an unmistakable signature, and underneath a name, Emily. It was in that instant that she understood what she feared. Emily wasn't just another child. She was so much more than that. The dates matched, the lines in the drawing, even the doll's name. My God, what if... But how could she confirm that without sounding crazy? How could she say that girl could be her granddaughter without knowing for sure? Maggie decided to go to Rose, the orphanage's oldest caregiver. "Do you remember Emily when she first arrived?" she asked. Rose hesitated. I remember what they said, that she was left by a silent woman with a little medal around her neck." Maggie pulled out the necklace Emily still wore. It was the same one her daughter gave to sick children in the hospital. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but something was still missing. Someone. Richard. He claimed to be Emily's father. But what if he wasn't? What if you were there for another reason? Maggie began investigating. She asked a friend from church who worked at the registry office for help. She wanted Emily's adoption record. She wanted the truth, even if it hurt. Meanwhile, Emily felt Maggie pulling away. "Why are you acting strange around me?" she asked one day. Maggie couldn't answer. Sometimes, the fear of loving again is greater than the desire to be close. Emily didn't understand, but she kept that phrase in her heart. She knew there was something Maggie couldn't say out loud. That week, Maggie didn't show up at the orphanage. They said she was sick, but the truth was different. She had received a call, a clue, an address, a name, and she set off alone to a nearby town, determined to find someone who could confirm Emily's origins. She took with her the photo, the drawing, and her faith. But when she got there, she found something completely unexpected. A terminally ill woman admitted to a simple clinic. This woman, upon seeing Emily's photo, cried, She's my sister's daughter. I took care of her for a while, but I was afraid to tell her." Maggie sat down, exhausted. The world was spinning. The lies were bigger than she could have imagined. While Maggie was unraveling this past at the orphanage, a mysterious letter arrived in the mail, addressed to Emily. It had no return address. It simply said, "For when you're ready." The director kept the letter without showing it. Maybe it's not the time, she thought. But there, inside that envelope, lay the key to one of the greatest secrets of Emily's life. And so it was, amidst tears and memories, that Maggie returned home. He knew he could hide nothing anymore. Emily deserved to know everything. But how could he tell a young girl that she might be the granddaughter of a woman who had lost her daughter, and who, ultimately, had also lost the years of their life together that could never be recovered? Before falling asleep, Maggie knelt beside her bed and prayed, "Lord, if it's your will, give me strength, show me the right time. And if it's true, don't let me miss this chance to love again." Outside, the wind blew hard, and a shooting star streaked across the sky. Emily in the mansion saw it too, and whispered, "I miss Miss Maggie." The next morning, the orphanage phone rang. An unfamiliar voice claimed to have information about Richard. But before the director could ask more, the line was disconnected. There was something about this story that reeked of deception, and Maggie was now closer to the truth than ever. She just needed the courage to open the last envelope. At the back of the orphanage closet, hidden behind a loose wooden panel, was a small shoebox, yellowed with age. Rose found it by chance while searching for an old blanket. Upon opening it, the scent of old paper and floral perfume filled the room. Inside were letters, many letters, all addressed to one person, Emily Grace. The letters were dated between 1998 and 2022. They were written in a feminine, elegant but shaky hand. Some had tear stains. Others had small drawings of hearts, flowers or teddy bears, but they all carried the same pain, longing, and one disturbing detail: none of them had been delivered. Rose, her eyes brimming with tears, carried the box to Maggie. Reading the first few lines, Maggie clapped her hand over her mouth. She tried, my God, she tried. The letters were from Emily's mother. The woman everyone thought had vanished without a trace had, in fact, been writing to her daughter all those years ago. But someone had prevented those words from reaching their destination. In one of the letters, Emily's mother said, "My dear little flower, every day I ask God to protect you. If you ever read this, know that I have never abandoned you." Maggie wept silently. That woman's pain permeated time. Emily needed to read it. But Maggie knew she had to prepare the right moment. It couldn't be any old way. Meanwhile, Emily was having strange dreams. She saw her mother in a field of lavender calling her name. "I'm here, my girl. I've always been." She woke with a heavy heart, as if she'd lost something precious without knowing what. Richard noticed her behavior, but avoided questions. He seemed afraid of what Emily might discover. At the orphanage, Rose began investigating. Who had hidden those letters? Was it the director, a former employee, or someone with a vested interest? In a locked closet in the basement, she found correspondence records. There were forged signatures, altered dates, and most shockingly, a direct order to intercept letters sent by a certain Laura G. Laura. That was Emily's mother's name. Maggie remembered an incident at the hospital where she worked. A young woman named Laura, desperate, had tried to register her daughter, but had been stopped by an influential man. He said he was the father, but there was something wrong with that man. Something dark. Now Maggie was beginning to suspect. What if that man was Richard? She returned to the letters. In one, Laura wrote, "He's haunting me. He doesn't want me to have my daughter, but I won't give up." Maggie's world spun. Could it be possible? Could Richard, the man who now claimed to be Emily's father, be the same man who tried to take custody of her years ago? If that were true, then it was all a sham. Maggie needed to be sure. She asked her friend at the registry office again for help. She requested Laura G's records and Emily's possible paternity. While she waited, she had all the letters scanned. She wanted to protect those words, save them forever. Emily had a right to know the truth, no matter how painful. At the mansion, Emily still felt something wasn't right. One night, she found a door ajar in Richard's office. She entered silently and saw an unlocked drawer. Inside, one of the letters she recognized by its yellowed paper and the scent of perfume. It was just like the one she'd dreamed about. How had it gotten there? She read only the beginning, "My Emily, my little piece of heaven," and felt her heart race. But before she could finish, Richard walked in. He took the letter from her hands and smiled, forcing it to be light. "Ah, this letter. I found it in an old book. It must be from someone who lived in the house for a long time." Emily didn't believe it, but she pretended to. She kept her suspicions to herself. The next day, Rose went to the mansion pretending to donate books. She handed Emily a box full of them and winked discreetly. At the bottom of the box was a scanned copy of the letters. Emily read them all in her room, alone, tears streaming down her face. Her mother loved her, always had, never abandoned her. One letter in particular read, "Emily, if you ever find me, look for Sarah at St. Mary's Hospital. She knows the whole truth." Sarah, that name sounded familiar. She was the nurse who cared for Maggie on her difficult days. Emily wasted no time. She hid the letters in her locker and pretended to go to school. She took a bus to the hospital. Once there, she looked for Nurse Sarah. She was an elderly woman with a kind face. When she heard the name Emily Grace, Sarah paled. She asked to sit down. Her hands were shaking. "I've waited a long time for this, my dear. Your mother, she made me promise that one day I would tell you everything." Emily could barely breathe. She felt the world spin around her. Sarah revealed that Laura had been admitted to the hospital after suffering a mysterious fall. She was pregnant. She had run away from home in fear of the man she was living with. She said he was dangerous, he had money and connections, and threatened to take everything from her. Sarah believed every word, and she helped Laura give birth right there in secret. After giving birth, Laura disappeared. But she left all her letters with Sarah, asking her to deliver them to her daughter when possible. Sarah tried, but the system and fear prevented her from doing so. The man Laura feared showed up at the hospital days later, demanding information. Sarah lied to protect them, but she kept everything, including a photo of the baby. Emily held the photo in her hands. It was her. There was no doubt. And in that instant, everything inside her changed. The memories, the dreams, the feelings, it all made sense now. My mother didn't abandon me. Someone took her away from me. Anger grew, but faith spoke louder. "God, help me deal with this." Sarah handed Emily a key. "It's in room 12, a metal cabinet. Inside are more things your mother left behind." Emily ran through the hospital as if her heart were about to explode. Room 12 was locked, but the key worked. Inside the cabinet were photos, documents, and an old Bible with red markings. On the last page of the Bible, a note, "Emily, a mother's love never dies. Follow the truth, even if it hurts, and never lose faith." She hugged the book tightly. She cried until she couldn't cry anymore. She knew that from that moment on, nothing would be the same. The truth had been buried, but now it was beginning to blossom. Outside the hospital, a black car watched the scene. Inside, a man on the phone said, "She's starting to remember. We need to act." It was Richard, but he wasn't alone. Someone beside him simply replied, "Then do whatever you have to." And the car disappeared down the street. Emily had unknowingly opened a door that could no longer be closed. The letters that never arrived were finally in her hands. But the consequences of this discovery, those were yet to come. Deep in the closet, between an old Bible and a forgotten envelope, lay another revelation, one that connected Maggie, Laura, and the truth no one dared tell. And as afternoon fell over Charleston, a question echoed in Emily's mind. Who was really telling the truth? What if this was all just the beginning? That night, as Emily secretly reviewed the letters in her bedroom, she felt something strange. It was as if she were being watched. She raised her eyes and looked out the window. The darkness of the garden seemed to breathe. And then, in the shadows, she saw it. A man standing by the fence, tall, motionless, wearing a black hat. She blinked, and he was gone. She ran down the hallway toward the living room. "Richard, there's someone out there!" she screamed. But when they returned to the window, the garden was empty. Richard tried to calm her, telling her she must have imagined it. But his expression wasn't surprise. It was something more, something like recognition. The next morning, Emily went down to breakfast and found Richard on the phone, whispering. When she walked in, he quickly hung up. "Good morning, dear. Did you sleep well?" he asked, smiling tightly. Emily faked a smile, but she knew something was wrong. The man in the black hat wasn't her imagination. She'd seen him, felt his gaze. At the orphanage, Maggie had a nightmare. She dreamed of a man in a black hat holding little Grace in his arms and getting into a car. She woke up screaming. Rose ran to her room. "It's him, Rose. He's back. The same man." Rose tried to calm her, but Maggie knew what she felt. It was the same terror from decades ago. Maggie went to church that afternoon. She sat in the back pew and prayed. "Lord, if this man has returned, show me how to protect Emily." An elderly woman approached. "You mean the man in the black hat?" Maggie turned, surprised. "How do you know?" "Because he showed up in front of my house yesterday, standing there, just staring." The town seemed trapped in an ancient cycle. People began reporting seeing the man in the black hat in various places. Always standing still, never speaking, just watching. Some said it was an omen, others a ghost from the past. But for Maggie, it was a reminder that old wounds hadn't healed. Emily decided to investigate on her own. She grabbed Richard's old camera and went out into the garden at night. She stood there for hours, waiting, and just when she was about to give up, she heard footsteps. She pointed the camera and took a picture. When she looked through the viewfinder, nothing. But in the captured image, there he was, black hat again. The next day, she printed the hidden photo. She showed it to Maggie, who went to the mansion disguised as a flower seller. When she saw the image, she sat down. "It's him. It's the same man who took Grace." Emily didn't understand. "Grace? Who's Grace?" Maggie took a deep breath. "It was my daughter. She disappeared. And this man was there." Everything was starting to come together. Maggie told her everything. How her daughter had mysteriously disappeared, how this man was involved, and how for some reason he was now surrounding Emily. "Maybe you're more attached to me than you think," Maggie said. Emily cried. She didn't understand everything, but she felt Maggie's pain as if it were her own. Rose, determined to help, searched through the orphanage's old files. She found a black and white photo. A man delivering a child to the orphanage's door. The face was blurred, but the black hat was unmistakable. On the back, a date, March 24th, 2001. It was the day Emily was dropped off there. Emily's heart raced. "Was he the one who left me?" Maggie nodded. "What if he's not your father, Emily? What if he's trying to hide something much bigger?" The words floated like ghosts in the room. Emily no longer knew who to trust. But one thing was certain, this man wasn't there by chance. That morning, Emily had another dream. She was in a field full of white crosses. The man in the black hat walked among them, whistling an old tune. When she turned, his face was Richard's. She woke up screaming, and a question burned inside her. What if Richard is the man in the black hat? She needed proof. She returned to his office and rummaged through drawers. She found a shoebox. Inside were old newspaper clippings. Headlines like, "Girl mysteriously disappears." "Witnesses report man in black hat." "Police silence raises suspicions." It all connected, but the key piece was missing. In the last locked drawer was a key and a note. The truth is where it all began. Emily knew what it meant. The orphanage. She needed to go back there, without telling anyone. She waited for nightfall, grabbed a coat and left. In her heart she carried fear, but also faith. She knew God was with her. When she got there, Maggie was waiting for her. "I knew you'd come." They entered together. Emily showed her the key. Maggie led her to an old room, formerly used for meetings. In the corner, an iron cabinet. The key worked. Inside, a folder, confidential documents, and a token that would change everything. The file reads the child's name, Emily Grace. Mother, Laura G. Father, name withheld by court order. Note, protection requested due to risk to physical integrity. Maggie couldn't hold back her tears. Your mother hid you from someone, and someone powerful enough to erase your father's name. But among the papers, one detail slipped through. A hotel receipt, dated 2 weeks before the abandonment. Signed, R. Kensington. Richard's full name was Richard Kensington. Emily trembled. He knew it from the start? The man who'd picked her up was the same man she should have feared. Returning to the mansion, she said nothing. She waited until Richard fell asleep. She picked up her camera again, went to the garden, and left a trap. A teddy bear with a note tied around its neck. You watch me. Now, I watch you too. She returned to her room, and for the first time, she slept with the light on. The next morning, the teddy bear was gone, but in its place, a black rose and a note. Silence protects, truth destroys. Emily felt her body freeze. He showed it to Maggie, who simply said, "It's time to tell everyone." And that was when they decided they would go to the police, take everything, the photos, the letters, the file, everything. But before that, they needed a plan. Richard was influential. He had friends in high places, and if he found out, everything could fall apart. Maggie called an old friend, the town pastor. "I need help and protection." He offered shelter at the rectory. Emily would spend the night there. As they were packing, Richard arrived home from work early. He noticed something different. "Where are they going?" he asked. Maggie calmly replied, "We're going to church. Emily needs peace." He smiled, but his eyes didn't smile. And turning his back, he picked up the phone. "They're moving. Do whatever you have to." In the car, Maggie drove in silence. Emily held her mother's Bible in her lap. The words, "Never lose faith," burned in her mind. When they arrived at the rectory, the pastor greeted them warmly. "You're safe here, for now." But no one could have imagined what would happen that night. At midnight there was a knock on the door. The pastor opened it. It was a delivery man. Flowers for Emily Grace, a bouquet of black roses, and a card. "Truth has a price." The pastor locked all the doors. "He's surrounding us." Emily wept. "Why does he do this?" Maggie hugged her. "Because the truth scares those who live by lies." While everyone slept, a figure walked in the forest surrounding the house, wearing a black hat. Silently, watching, always watching. Emily woke with a shiver. She went to the window and saw him, standing in the moonlight. And then he waved, slowly, as if to say, "It's not over yet." And she knew it. The next step would be the most dangerous, because now it wasn't just about her past. It was about survival, faith, justice, and facing the truth, even if it destroyed everything she thought was real. And what no one knew was that the man in the black hat still had an ace up his sleeve. The mansion's basement had always been a mystery. From day one, Richard had forbidden anyone from opening it. He said it was full of old, broken objects and could be dangerous. But Emily always knew there was more down there. Something about that wooden door, reinforced with a rusty chain, seemed to hold more than dust and memories. One morning, while Richard was away on business, Emily found the key he kept in his office. It was tucked inside a fake Bible, a hiding place that, ironically, symbolized how much the truth was being hidden. Key in hand, she waited until the house was empty. She walked downstairs with her heart racing. As she turned the key, a sharp click echoed through the house. The chain fell to the floor with a metallic clang. Emily took a deep breath and pushed open the door. A strong smell of mold and rotting wood invaded her nostrils. The darkness seemed alive, as if it had been waiting for her. She grabbed her phone's flashlight and took the first step. The stairs creaked with each step, as if complaining to be woken. The air was colder here, thicker. The walls were covered with old, framed photographs, some familiar, some disturbing. One large painting showed a child beside a woman who looked very much like Laura, her mother. Emily stopped. Her blood ran cold. Further back, she found stacked boxes. One of them was marked with the initials LG, Laura Grace. Opening it, she saw old toys, a headless doll, and letters tied with red ribbon. They were drafts of the same letters she had read weeks before, but these were crossed out with words like forbidden, danger, do not send. Emily could hear footsteps above her, but she knew she was alone. The mansion seemed alive, reacting to each revelation. In a corner, an antique armchair faced the wall. Turning it, she found something she would never forget. A bloodied child's dress, neatly folded with an embroidered label. Gracie. Her heart nearly stopped. Gracie, Maggie's daughter's nickname. The dress was there, in that house. But how? The connection was real and disturbing. Emily fell to her knees, clutching the fabric with trembling hands. She wept. My God, what have they done to her? A silent prayer escaped her lips. Protect the truth, Lord. Give me strength. She continued exploring. She found a bookshelf full of diaries, signed by Richard. The first was from 1995. He wrote about guilt, about control, about trusting no one. And on a yellowed page he wrote, "The girl must forget everything, forget who she is, forget who she was." Emily trembled. She took photos of everything. She needed to show Maggie and Rose to the police. But something told her to go deeper. At the end of the basement there was a smaller door, hidden by curtains. Opening it, a new room appeared. White tiles, marks on the floor. It looked like some kind of makeshift clinic. And in the center, a gurney. On the gurney lay a notebook, pages filled with names, dates, and diagnoses. Many were crossed out, but one name appeared repeatedly. Emily Grace. Fragmented memories, emotional instability, reprogramming required. This wasn't a medical diary, it was a record of manipulation. Emily felt nauseous. In one of the drawers of the metal cabinet, he found VHS tapes, unmarked. He carried one to his room, his hands sweaty. He inserted it into the old machine in the mansion's library. The image crackled, but soon emerged. A dark room, a child sitting, surrounded by adults asking repetitive questions. The child was her. The tape showed sessions where Emily was interrogated, contradicted, and coerced into changing her memories. With each attempt, she cried. And in the background, a man's voice. It was Richard. She needs to forget, erase everything. Emily turned off the tape and screamed. She felt as if her entire childhood had been stolen and rewritten like a book of lies. She decided not to sleep there that night. She grabbed the evidence and went straight to the orphanage. Maggie greeted her with teary eyes. They watched the videos together. Maggie couldn't hold back her tears. He destroyed you. He destroyed me. Emily didn't know how to comfort her. She just held her hand, and they prayed together on their knees on the office floor. The next day, Rose revealed something she'd long kept hidden. Back when Emily was dropped off here, we received a huge donation. Cash, anonymous. After that, everything became more rigid, more controlled. He showed her the records. The donation came from an account linked to Kensington Enterprises, Richard's company. With each new document, the story fell into place. Richard had bought silence. He had manipulated the institution, and likely he had erased all trace of Laura. Emily wanted justice, but she also wanted answers. He still didn't know what had happened to his mother. If she was alive, if she was dead, if she could still be found. Maggie, for her part, remembered a forgotten detail. In Gracie's medical records, there was a doctor's name, Dr. Howard. They decided to look for him. He was a retired man living in a cabin on the outskirts of town. When they saw his photo in the old newspaper, Emily froze. It was the same man who appeared on the tapes next to Richard. They went to the cabin. He hesitated to open the door, but when he saw Emily, he paled. My God, you've grown up. She didn't know whether to run or cry, but she stayed. Maggie was blunt. We want the truth, the whole thing. He ushered them in. He said he couldn't bear to live with it anymore, and he confessed. Richard used the basement as a laboratory to reprogram memories. He said Laura tried to run away when she found out, that she took Emily with her, but she was caught, drugged, and that Richard kept her sedated for weeks while he tried to create another identity for his daughter. Emily cried. Maggie screamed. The doctor said he saved Laura once, but then she disappeared. I don't know if she's still alive, but she fought. He handed her an envelope with more tapes. One was labeled The Last Session. Emily didn't want to watch it, but she knew she had to. They returned to the orphanage. Maggie, Rose, and the pastor watched it together. On the tape, Laura pleaded, "Don't take my daughter away. She's all I have." Then screams, and the screen went black. The silence after the video was devastating. Emily went to the garden and cried silently. After a while, Maggie found her. She hugged her tightly. "You are the fruit of a mother's resilience, and now of a girl's courage." Emily smiled through her tears. But something still haunted her. That basement room. There was something she hadn't opened. She decided to return to the mansion alone. She waited until nightfall, sneaked in, and went down to the basement. She went to the clinic, and behind a broken mirror, she found a secret door. Inside, a dark room, a cabinet labeled Future Projects. Opening it, she found a folder with a new file. Name, Emily Grace Kensington. Date, next week. She understood everything. Richard was preparing to erase her again, to restart the manipulation. But why? What was the plan? On the last page of the file, the answer, transfer to international facility, danger of full awakening, eliminate if necessary. Emily fell to the floor. He intended to silence her forever. With her documents in hand, she fled the mansion for the last time. She went straight to the rectory. She handed everything over to the pastor. "I won't run anymore. It's time to fight." He agreed. "The truth sets you free, even when it hurts. And evil only triumphs in silence," Emily prayed. For her mother, for Maggie, for herself, and for justice. The mansion's basement, which once held only shadows, was now the cradle of truth. Everything Richard had been hiding was about to be revealed, but what no one knew was that he still had allies, and he wouldn't give up his empire of lies without a fight. The next step would be dangerous, because now, Emily, she was ready to face it. And the only question that remained was, who else knew about the existence of that basement? Emily couldn't get the blue doll she'd found weeks before out of her head. There was something in that glassy gaze that haunted her even with her eyes closed. The doll had a name embroidered on its dress, Annabelle. But that name had never been mentioned by anyone, not in letters, not on index cards, not in conversations. It was as if it had been erased. That morning, while helping Rose organize old things from the orphanage, she found a box of forgotten toys. And there, between an earless bear and an incomplete puzzle, was she, Annabelle. But this was a different version. Her dress was clean, her hair was combed, and on the bottom of the box a label read, "Property of A.G. A.G." The initials thudded like thunder in Emily's chest. Annabelle Grace! Did she have a sister? She ran to Maggie with the doll in her hands. Maggie went pale. She sat down without saying a word, and after a long silence she whispered, "I knew she wasn't alone." Maggie then told him something she'd never had the courage to reveal. Laura, Emily's mother, arrived at the hospital pregnant with twins, but during the birth complications arose. They told her that one of the girls had died. Laura was in despair, but she never saw the body. She only heard it, and something inside her always told her that was a lie. The other baby's name was Annabelle. Maggie remembered because Laura had spoken that name frequently during her hospitalization. "My girls, Emily and Annabelle, promised to protect me from the dark," she said in a trance. But then, the second child's records disappeared, and Laura was drugged, sedated, and forcibly taken by someone Maggie could never identify. With this in mind, Emily returned to the abandoned mansion. She sensed the doll had been left there for a reason. In Richard's old room, he found a broken music box. Upon opening it, a familiar melody played, the same one Laura hummed in her old videos. Inside the box was a torn photo. In it, two identical babies. Her heart nearly stopped. The two babies wore matching dresses with embroidered names, Emily and Annabelle. The photo was cropped at the top, where someone had ripped out the faces of the adults in the background. But it didn't matter. She knew. She had a sister, and someone had lied about her death. She took the photo to Rose, who confirmed, "I remember a second baby, but we were told it was a hallucination of the mother. They said it was best not to talk about it." Emily felt the world spin. Her entire life had been built on half-truths, and now everything seemed to be starting over from scratch. They decided to investigate the hospital records. They went to St. Mary's Hospital. The secretary hesitated, but upon hearing the name Laura G., her face changed. "Follow me." They were led to a room of old files, and there, at the bottom of a dusty drawer, was the birth record, multiple birth, female, X2. But the second form was crossed out. Where Annabelle's name had been, there was now a red stamp. Transferred. To where? And why? The secretary shook her head. "That's odd. Normally there's transfer documentation. This one just says, 'Special delivery authorized,' and it's signed by Dr. Howard, the same doctor who had helped Richard." They immediately returned to the doctor's cabin. He hesitated, but upon seeing the photo of the two babies, he burst into tears. I tried to save them, but I was threatened. The second child was given to a foreign family. They said it was for her safety, but I never believed it." Emily grabbed his hand. "Where is she?" she asked, her voice breaking. Howard trembled. "I don't know. It all happened so fast. I was out of my mind. They just told me she would be raised far away." "Without ever knowing who she was," Emily cried. But for the first time she cried for someone she might still find. Maggie remembered something important. Years ago, a young woman with features very similar to Emily's appeared at the orphanage. Her name was Bella. She spoke little. She was afraid of everything. But she suddenly disappeared one rainy night after a mysterious visit. "Could it have been her?" Emily asked. "Now, I don't doubt anything." They searched the city records. They found an adoption record with the name Isabella Grace, born on the same day as Emily. Adopted by a Canadian family, she disappeared 2 years later. No one investigated. No one searched. The case was closed. Emily clutched the doll to her chest. "Annabelle, Bella, that was you." They decided to go to Canada. They got the adoptive parents' old address. The house was abandoned. Neighbors said the family vanished overnight after a visit from a man in a dark hat. Emily felt the ground disappear. He was everywhere, silent, relentless, but an elderly neighbor told her something else. The girl, Bella, she was sweet. She liked to play with dolls, but she had nightmares. She always said, "The bad man came to get her at night." Emily swallowed. And then the woman said, "Before they left, she left me a present. She said it was from her sister." The woman brought a small box lined with blue cloth. Inside was a medallion just like the one Emily wore. Engraved, "E.G. with eternal love, from your sister." Emily broke down. This was the biggest sign of all. Bella knew she had a sister, and she tried to tell the world. But no one listened. They returned to the US with the medallion. Rose had it analyzed in a lab. The DNA confirmed Bella and Emily were twins. The report was irrefutable. Emily fell to her knees. Lord, guide me to her. Maggie held the doll, as if it were an extension of the granddaughter she'd never met. She's alive. I can feel it. With the pastor's help, they launched an online campaign. They told part of the story, using photos, documents, and the doll's image. Within days, hundreds of messages appeared. Some were fake, others were frightening. But one caught their attention. It was from a young woman named Annabelle Grace Moore. She lived in Seattle. She said, "I think I'm the one you're looking for." Emily couldn't hold back her tears. They responded immediately. They made a video call. When the screen lit up, it was like looking in a mirror. Two young women with the same eyes, the same smile, and the same emptiness of someone who had their childhood stolen. "Are you real?" Bella asked. Emily smiled. "As real as you." They arranged to meet. When they saw each other at the airport, there were no words. Just an embrace that seemed to unite two shattered worlds. Tears came from all sides. Maggie, Rose, even the pastor were crying. It was a miracle. And amidst all the pain, love found a way. Bella said she'd lived in many places, always being taken from one place to another. She never knew who she was until she found the blue doll in an old attic, the same doll Emily held now. "It kept us connected," Bella said. "Even without knowing it, we were searching for each other." The sisters decided to live together. They began rebuilding their lives, even under the still-present threat of Richard and his allies. But now they were no longer alone. They were united and determined to expose everything. Emily looked at the doll on the shelf and whispered, "Thank you for keeping our story." And the most incredible thing of all is that very day, a new letter arrived in the mail. No return address, addressed to both of them. Inside, just a handwritten sentence. "You are closer to the truth than you think." Signed, M. And for the first time, it wasn't fear that took over, but faith. Because now they knew the past could have been manipulated, but the future was in the hands of those who never gave up on love. And the sisters still had much to discover. The days that followed their reunion were intense. Emily and Annabelle, or Bella, as she preferred, spent hours talking, exchanging fragmented memories, and trying to piece together the gaps in their stories. With each new conversation, more pieces fell into place. But there was still something missing. Something all the clues seemed to point to, but no one could quite put a name to. It was then that Maggie remembered an old conversation with Laura. Shortly before she was admitted, Laura had repeatedly said, "If anything happens to me, look for the will. It's all there." At the time, Maggie thought she was delusional, but now it all made sense. They needed to find this document before it fell into the wrong hands. They started with the house where Laura lived during her pregnancy. It was a simple cottage on the outskirts of Charleston. The structure was abandoned, but some of the furniture still stood the test of time. Emily felt a chill as she entered. It was as if her mother's presence still lingered within those walls. "Mom was here. I can feel it." Bella found a trap door under the living room floor. Beneath it, a locked metal box. Maggie recognized it immediately. This box belonged to Laura's father. She always said it kept her most important secrets there. They pried it open carefully. Inside were old photos, a wedding ring, a Bible, and a sealed envelope. Laura Grace's will. Emily trembled as she opened the envelope. The document was intact, signed, and notarized. In it, Laura declared that, in the event of her death, custody of her daughters would be given to the only person she trusted, Margaret H. Maggie herself. The shock was instantaneous. Maggie wept. She trusted me, and I didn't even know how to protect them. The will also mentioned a fund left by Laura, the proceeds of the sale of a family heirloom. a considerable sum intended to be used exclusively for the girls' well-being, but neither of them ever received a penny. Emily's eyes widened. So someone took that money, Bella added, and erased the will. They returned to town to check the official record. Laura's name was there at the registry office, but the folder containing the will was empty. The clerk said, "We never received anything from her." But the stamp on the original envelope proved otherwise. Maggie showed the registry office's seal. The clerk paled. That's legitimate. But how did it disappear from here? They reported the missing document to the authorities. A police officer, a friend of the pastor, took charge of the case and promised to open a confidential investigation. Meanwhile, Maggie sought refuge in the rectory again. Here, at least, we have God close by, and we need protection more than ever. That night, someone broke into the cottage. They took everything, ransacked the furniture, but didn't find the will, which was already safe. On the floor, a single word written in charcoal: silence. Emily knew instantly. Richard, or someone on his orders. Bella sat on the floor, hugging the blue doll. He knows we're close. At the orphanage, Rose found another clue. Digging through old files, she found a receipt for a bank transfer made by Richard's company to an offshore account. The amount matched the fund mentioned in the will. "He stole the girl's money," Rose said, "and paid to hide it all." Meanwhile, Bella began having flashbacks, confused memories of a cold place with voices saying, "You don't have a sister. You're unique." They were painful, but important memories. They showed that the attempt to separate them had been going on for a long time, and that someone had worked hard to erase the past. They decided to consult a lawyer. They showed him the will, the receipts, the recordings. The lawyer was silent for a moment, then said, "You have a strong case. If you prove the authenticity of all this, Richard could be prosecuted for fraud, kidnapping, embezzlement, and more." Emily took a deep breath. "We're ready." Maggie, however, was worried. "He won't let this happen without reacting. He has money, connections, and hatred in his heart." The pastor suggested involving the press, making what they knew public. When the light shines in, evil retreats. But there were risks, and they needed to protect the girls above all else. Before that, the police chief brought news. A former notary employee had been located, retired, and he remembered the will. It was a blonde woman, very nervous. She asked to register it immediately, saying her daughter's lives depended on it. He even had a carbon copy of the document, the missing proof. Now, with 2 copies, the lawyer began legal proceedings, and the press caught wind of the case. Headlines filled the city. "Forgotten will may reveal crimes of influential businessmen." Richard tried to deny everything. He said he was the victim of a setup. But every day new evidence emerged. A former driver came forward anonymously. He said he transported a baby out of state under Richard's orders. Another employee revealed he saw Richard with a folder marked "Will." The pieces fit together. The truth, as always, was beginning to emerge, slowly but surely. Richard, cornered, began sending indirect messages, black flowers, cards with veiled threats, and even a note left at the rectory: "What God unites, man can separate." The pastor increased security. Emily and Bella began to always be accompanied, but they didn't back down. Their faith was stronger. One afternoon, they received an unexpected visitor. An elderly woman named Eleanor claimed to have been Laura's friend in her youth. She brought with her a box of letters they had exchanged. In one of them, Laura spoke of her fear of Richard and her certainty that he would take everything if given the chance. Eleanor also said that Laura had left a diary with her, a lost diary, full of details about her relationship with Richard. She handed it to the girls with trembling hands. "She knew one day you would come." The diary described emotional manipulation, psychological abuse, and constant threats. He said if I left him, he would take my daughters from me. The lawyer added the diary to the case. The judge accepted the documentation as valid and ordered a preliminary hearing. It was the first major victory. Emily looked at Maggie, who was smiling through her tears. "You'll make it, my daughter, and your mother is here with you." The day before the hearing, Bella had another dream. She was with Laura in a lavender field. Laura held her and Emily's hands. "Fight, my girls. The truth is like sunlight. Eventually it pierces any darkness." Bella woke up crying, but for the first time she felt peace. The hearing was scheduled for the next morning. The courtroom was packed. Cameras, reporters, curious eyes. Richard arrived with his lawyers and a cold expression. Emily and Bella entered hand in hand, Maggie and the pastor at their sides. The judge called for silence, and then the proceedings began. For the first few minutes, Richard tried to dismiss the documents. He claimed the will was a forgery, but when the carbon copy and the retired notary's testimony were presented, silence fell. Richard's eyes wavered. For the first time, he looked afraid. The sisters' lawyer presented all the evidence: the embezzlement of funds, the attempted erasure of records, the disappearance of their mother's letters, the reprogramming tapes. It was more than a legal case. It was a story of injustice, pain, and survival. The judge requested a recess to review the materials. During the break, Richard was escorted out. Reporters pressed him. "Did you kidnap one of the girls? And what do you have to say about the will?" But he didn't answer. He just got into his car and disappeared into the crowd. The atmosphere was tense, but Emily, sitting on the bench in the courtroom, held her sister's hand and repeated, "Everything will be okay." The judge returned. He called for silence. Then he announced, "There is sufficient evidence to proceed with the criminal case. Furthermore, I recognize the legitimacy of Laura Grace's will." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Maggie wept. Rose shouted, "Hallelujah!" And Emily just closed her eyes and prayed. But outside, on top of a neighboring building, someone was observing the scene through binoculars. It was him, the man in the black hat. A slight smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. He pulled out his cell phone. They won today, but the game isn't over yet. And in that moment, the girls understood. The truth was on their side. But the war wasn't over yet. St. Mary's Hospital was old, with narrow hallways and windows that creaked in the wind. Emily and Bella returned after the lawyer mentioned that the records from the old pediatric ward had been relocated to the basement. They wanted to find any trace of Laura's hospitalization. But there was another reason. Something called to them there. A feeling Emily couldn't explain. Upon arrival, a nurse guided them to the archives. There they found forgotten charts, files, and reports. They searched for hours until Bella found a strange document, a chart labeled Patient LG. But in the discharge field, a cryptic phrase transferred to Window 12. "Window 12, Emily repeated. The nurse explained that there was an old room called that in the decommissioned psychiatric ward. It was on the top floor, on the east side. It's now sealed, but they insisted. They climbed the emergency stairs to the top floor. The peeling walls and cracked tiles made the room even more somber. They reached the door to Window 12. It was locked with rusty chains. But one of the side windows was ajar. Maggie, who had insisted on accompanying them, found an iron bar and broke the lock. When they entered, the sensation was immediate. It was as if someone had just left. The room was small, with an iron bed, a nightstand, and a rocking chair. On the wall were children's drawings taped with yellowed tape, flowers, birds, and two girls holding hands. The window pane, scrawled with a finger, read, "My daughters will find me." Emily fell to her knees. In that rocking chair sat a hunched figure, an elderly woman with white hair wrapped in a blue shawl. The nurse, seeing her, cried out, "Ms. Celeste, how did you get here?" But Celeste didn't answer. She just looked at Emily and Bella and smiled. A serene smile, as if she'd waited a long time. Celeste was a former hospital nurse who'd been missing for years. They said she'd lost her mind after caring for a patient named Laura G. and becoming too attached to the story. Some thought she'd died, others that she'd run away. But there she was, alive, trembling, and conscious. "I knew you would come," she said weakly. "She asked me to wait. She said you would need me." Emily took her hand. "Did you know our mother?" Celeste nodded. "She was light in human form. She fought until her last day, and she left something for you." Celeste pointed to the wall behind the bed. Maggie pushed aside the furniture with effort. There was a built-in safe. The password, a Bible verse written in children's drawings, Psalm 27:10. "Though my father and my mother forsake me, the Lord will take me up," Emily typed. The safe opened with a sharp click. Inside was a wooden box, and inside, letters. Letters again, written by Laura during the days she was locked inside. She spoke of her fear, her love for her daughters, and her plans to escape. And, in a separate envelope, a special letter. "For the day there are two of us again." The letter was filled with emotion. Laura wrote with faith, "You were separated, but you never stopped being part of each other. May heaven guide your steps, and may you never let evil extinguish your light." Bella wept silently. Emily read aloud. Maggie knelt, praying, and Celeste watched in peace. At the base of the safe, another envelope, medical documents, X-rays, reports, and a file containing the truth Richard had tried to hide. Laura was healthy. There was no sign of delirium, psychosis, or instability. The hospitalization was faked, a medical kidnapping, a disguised imprisonment. Celeste said that when she tried to report him, she was fired. But before that, she hid everything in that room. "I knew he would come after me, so I asked God to protect you. And he listened." Emily hugged her. "You're our angel." The former nurse smiled. "No, I'm just a bridge. The real angel is her." On the wall, a crayon painting, Laura with angel wings, protecting two sleeping girls. It was simple, childlike, yet powerful. Bella took a photo. "Let's tell this to the world." Emily nodded. "This story isn't just ours. It's about all the mothers who fight, and all the daughters who don't give up." They took Celeste with them. The hospital promised to care for her. The press received the images, documents, and recordings. The impact was immediate. Laura's name was reinstated. The accusations against Richard mounted, but he disappeared. He fled before the new court summons. Meanwhile, Emily and Bella began visiting the hospital every week. Window 12 was transformed into a memorial, a space of faith, courage, and memory. There they left letters for their mother, flowers, and children's drawings. It was a sanctuary, a place where love had conquered silence. Maggie decided to write a book about it all. She called it The Daughters of Heaven. The book gained national attention. It became a symbol of female resilience and unwavering faith. Emily and Bella began giving interviews, but they always said the same thing: "We are not victims. We are the victory of truth." One rainy Sunday, they received a call. A woman claimed to have known Laura in the last days of her life. She said Laura had been taken to a secret shelter by Celeste, and that there, before her death, she had left a final request. "May my girls know freedom, and may they never stop praying." The woman sent a recording, Laura's voice weak but firm. "My daughters, you are heaven in human form. Forgive, live, and fight with love." Emily listened as if time had stopped. Bella held her hand. "She never left us." And Maggie wept softly. "Thank you, God. Thank you." The following week, they returned to Window 12 with flowers. Sunlight streamed through the glass. And there, in the corner of the window, was a strange reflection, like wings. Emily smiled. Bella whispered, "She's here." Maggie replied, "She always has been." And in that simple room, where silence once screamed louder than hope, there was now light. There was faith. There was life. But across town, in an abandoned clinic, a figure watched the news angrily. It was Richard. "Angels don't win wars," he said, and he turned off the TV. Emily, however, knew the battle might be far from over, but with faith as their shield and truth as their sword, they were not alone. The rain was falling lightly when Emily and Bella arrived at the Cemetery of the Innocents. The site was on the outskirts of Charleston, hidden among ancient trees and forgotten graves. Maggie insisted they go there. She said that according to Celeste, Laura had left a clue on that sacred ground. The place was silent but heavy, as if each headstone held a secret. The caretaker, a gentleman with a deep voice and slow steps, was waiting for them at the gate. "You're Laura's daughters, aren't you?" Emily nodded. He motioned for them to follow him. "She asked me, years ago, to guard something. She said if two girls ever showed up together, I'd know. And now you're here." The path between the headstones was narrow and covered in leaves. They passed rusted crosses, faded names, and wilted flowers, until they stopped in front of an unmarked grave, just a simple wooden cross with a blue ribbon tied around the center. The caretaker pointed to the ground. "It's here." Carefully they began to dig. There was no coffin, no remains, but they found a metal box wrapped in thick plastic. Inside were a Bible, a rag doll, and a sealed envelope. Maggie read the name on the envelope, "To the last day before freedom." It was Laura's handwriting. They sat right there on the wet grass. They opened the envelope. It was a long letter. Laura explained that before being taken, she hid there the only things she could save: her mother's Bible, the doll Emily slept hugging, and the letter she had written for the day her daughters found the light again. "My daughters, if you read this, it means you survived. That love won, that God kept the flame of our bond alive. Never doubt that, not even when the whole world tells you it's too late." Bella wept silently. Emily read aloud, her voice choked with tears. In the letter, Laura said she had left clues in various places. She knew they would one day reconstruct the truth, and most strikingly, she mentioned a name: Reverend Malcolm. Maggie's eyes widened. This man, he disappeared mysteriously 20 years ago. He was the only one who knew the whole truth. The caretaker then added, "He was buried here, but away from the common area." Laura asked for his body to be kept separate because she said that one day, something buried with him would need to be recovered. Everyone fell silent. It was as if time had stopped. The next step was inevitable. Led by the caretaker, they made their way to a secluded area of the cemetery. It was different from the others. There were fewer graves, fewer trees. Only a dark stone marker bearing the inscription, "Here lies the one who chose truth." Maggie knelt and began digging with her bare hands. They found another smaller box. Inside were rolled-up documents, old photos, and a cassette recording. Beside it, a note: "This is my confession. May God forgive me." They returned to the rectory, wet and silent. The mood was reverent, the moment sacred. They listened to the tape in silence. Reverend Malcolm's voice was firm but weary. "I was complicit. I watched silently as Laura was silenced. I received donations in exchange for my silence, but I regretted it, and I started collecting evidence. If you're listening to this, it's because God allowed it." On the tape, he confirmed everything: the forced hospitalization, the separation of the twins, the manipulation of records, and the source of the money used to corrupt the system. Richard Kensington is responsible. He destroyed a family for vanity and power. But God will restore. The tape ended with a prayer. Emily couldn't hold back her tears. Bella, beside her, held the rag doll. Maggie clutched the Bible with both hands. He fell, but he handed over the key first. And that key was there, in the evidence, in the words, in the faith of those who didn't give up even in the face of death. With this new material, they returned to court. The judge was impressed. He ordered the warrant for Richard's arrest to be strengthened. The media intensified its coverage. The entire town now knew and supported it. For the first time, the sisters felt justice was within reach. But the next night, the cemetery was vandalized. The wooden cross where Laura had left her belongings was burned. The reverend's grave was desecrated. The caretaker was missing. Emily stared at the wreckage and murmured, "He's trying to erase everything." Bella replied, "But the truth has already blossomed." The pastor decided to hold a prayer vigil right there in the cemetery. People came from all over the city. They lit candles, prayed, and sang hymns. Faith spread like wildfire. Emily looked up to the sky and whispered, "Mommy, you did it. Your light hasn't gone out." During the vigil, an unknown woman approached Bella. She handed her an envelope and disappeared into the crowd. Inside was a photo of Laura in an unknown shelter, dated a year after her supposed death. On the back, handwritten, "She lived more than they said, and left more than they promised." This revelation rekindled doubts. Had Laura been alive longer? Where had she been? Who had cared for her? The questions multiplied, and now they knew the story was far from over. The truth lay in layers, like the roots of an ancient tree, difficult to uproot, impossible to hide. Back at the rectory, Bella found a rolled-up piece of paper in her doll's pocket. On it, a coordinate, a secluded spot among the mountains. Emily frowned. "Do you think—" Bella nodded. "I think it's time to follow the next calling." Maggie blessed them both with a prayer. Wherever it is, God is already there. And as the rain continued to fall on the cemetery of the innocents, Emily and Bella set off into the unknown. Because they knew that where there is faith, there is light, and where there is light, truth always finds a way to rise again. But in the shadows of an ancient tree, someone was watching through binoculars. It was Richard. Dirty, his face was tired, but his eyes were still filled with hatred. "You may have won the people, but you haven't won me yet." And he disappeared among the tombstones, like a ghost from a past that refuses to die. The road to the mountains was narrow, winding, and shrouded in fog. Emily and Bella walked with heavy hearts, guided only by faith and the enigmatic coordinate found on the doll. Every curve seemed to hide a new secret. Every stone seemed to echo Laura's voice, whispering, "Keep going, my daughters." They arrived at an old cabin, perched on a secluded hilltop. The place was empty, but well kept. There were fresh flowers on the porch and an open Bible on the living room table. Emily ran her fingers over the pages and felt a strange warmth in her chest. "She was here," he said. Bella nodded, "and not long ago." Inside the cabin they found hanging portraits, photos of two girls growing up far away, one in Charleston, the other in Canada. Someone was with them and recording everything. In the center of the wall, a handwritten phrase, "They were never alone." Emily swallowed. Who did this? In the attic, there was a trunk with more letters, all signed with the letter M. Some were prayers, others accounts of Laura's fate after her final escape. She lived in hiding for years, far from Richard's eyes. She was cared for by a secret network of Christian women who protected victims of persecution, and she recorded everything. Laura spoke of regret, but also of forgiveness. "I can't change the past, but I can pray for my daughter's future, that they never lose faith, that they know they were chosen by God for something much greater." Bella clasped her hands. So, she knew. She always knew. As they explored the cabin, a distant clap of thunder split the sky. The storm was approaching. Emily found an envelope on the bed. Inside was an additional will, handwritten by Laura. "If their names are ever restored, may they also receive the name I gave them in prayer, light and hope." They looked at each other with tears in their eyes. Emily was light. Bella was hope. That gave meaning to everything. God's name had been branded upon them since their womb. "This was always the plan," Emily whispered, "and the enemy tried to erase it from the beginning." Bella hugged her sister. But he failed. Outside the cabin, a small makeshift chapel stood out. There, a glass wall allowed a view of the open sky, even amidst the storm. On the ceiling, something written in white paint read, "Their names are written in heaven." It was as if Laura's own faith had left a permanent mark there. Emily knelt on the cold floor. Bella did the same. They prayed together for their mother, their grandmother, Maggie, Rose, Celeste, and even Richard. Lord, transform the hearts of those who have hurt us, because what conquers evil is love. The tears that flowed were of healing and of deliverance. They returned to the city with all the new evidence. The court set the final trial. Richard was found in a warehouse on the outskirts, disoriented and surrounded by newspaper clippings. The arrest was silent, almost melancholic. The man who had once been powerful was now nothing but ruin. The trial was broadcast live. Thousands watched. Emily and Bella, dressed in white, entered the courtroom hand in hand. The judge read all the documents. The prosecution presented the videos, audio, reports, and Laura's letters. The verdict was clear: guilty on all counts. Richard was sentenced to life in prison. But Emily didn't smile. Instead, she stood, looked him in the eye, and said, "I forgive you, not for what you did, but for what God can do with your soul if you allow it." The silence in the room was absolute. Even Richard bowed his head. Outside, the sky opened, and as if by divine sign, 2 rays of sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating Emily and Bella. The crowd applauded, but they simply closed their eyes and gave thanks. "Thank you, Lord, for not giving up." Maggie was honored in a public square. Rose, Celeste, and the pastor were too. Maggie's book became a bestseller. Schools, churches, and support centers began citing the sisters' story as an example of faith, courage, and justice. But the most important thing was yet to come. At the school where Emily studied as a child, a new wing has been opened. It's called the Room of Hope and Light. There, at-risk girls receive support, love, and protection. The blue doll is on display next to Laura's Bible as living proof that faith can span generations. One day, Bella received a letter. No return address, just one verse. "Your word I have hidden in my heart, that I might not sin against you." It was Psalm 119:11, Laura's favorite. Inside, a simple note: "The mission isn't over yet. There are other girls who need you." They understood the call. They began visiting shelters, orphanages, and underprivileged communities. They told their stories, but listened even more. And in every bruised face, they saw a part of themselves. "You are not alone," they always said. "Your name is also written in heaven." One sunny Sunday during a service, the pastor called Emily and Bella to the altar. He asked them to share a message. Emily said, "We were separated by lies, but united by faith, and when all seemed lost, God reminded us that our identity wasn't in our documents, it was in Him." The entire church rose in applause and prayer. Maggie wept in the front pew, and heaven once again seemed to smile, because there, in that simple church, 2 girls told a story of pain, but also of miracle. Later, high on a hill, Emily wrote on the tallest stone, "Laura Grace. Mother, warrior, prophet, we prevail." And below, Bella wrote, "Hope and light, survivors of an eternal promise." And then they looked up to the sky, and they saw something they would never forget. A heart-shaped cloud. A sign? A coincidence? It didn't matter. What mattered was the certainty Laura was there. In every gesture, in every prayer, in every heartbeat. And as the sun set over Charleston and the story spread across the world, the truth remained: no evil is greater than love. No lie is stronger than faith, and no name is lost when it's written in the sky. But even with justice served and the past redeemed, something still lingered in the air. A question that kept coming back. What if there are others? Emily and Bella looked at each other, and they left, because they knew that the mission, in fact, was just beginning. Emily and Bella's story isn't just about pain, separation, and injustice. It's about the strength that comes from choosing to believe, even without seeing, about the power of faith when all seems lost, and above all, about the love that transcends time, silence, and even death. How many times have you felt forgotten, ignored? How many times have you tried to scream and no one heard? How many truths have you kept hidden for fear of not being believed? This story is for you, to remind you that God sees, God hears, and that heaven never forgets your name. Emily and Bella were separated by lies and reunited by faith, but what strengthened them most wasn't the evidence, the courts, or the documents. It was their mother's love, even in her absence, Maggie's prayers, even in silence, and the courage to never give up on each other. What kind of strength do you need to awaken within yourself? Maybe you have a painful past, full of scars no one understands. Maybe you have secrets buried like those in the cemetery of the innocents. But believe me, no pain is invisible to God, and no story is lost as long as there is someone willing to fight for love and truth. Now I ask you, have you ever felt like your story has been manipulated, that someone tried to erase who you truly are, that your identity has been stifled? What would you do if you could start over knowing that your name is written in heaven, engraved by the hands of the Creator? You have a calling, a mission. You may not even know what it is yet, but it exists. And maybe, like Emily and Bella, all you need is to take the first step of faith. Open the door to the basement of your soul, face your fears, truly pray, and say, Lord, show me who I truly am. If this story spoke to your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with other women. Bring this light to someone else. How many Emilys and Bellas are still trapped in silence? How many Lauras fought alone until the end? And how many Margarets continue to pray for a miracle? Leave your comment below. Tell me, have you ever felt something similar? Have you ever felt like the world wanted to erase you? That no one believed in you? Let's talk. Your voice matters. Your pain will not be ignored here. This community is made for acceptance, not judgment. I'd like to take this opportunity to invite you to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. That way, you won't miss any stories like this. Stories that touch the soul, that inspire, that transform. And if you're already here with us, may God bless you with all grace and mercy. Remember, no tear is in vain, no prayer is forgotten, and no name will ever be erased from heaven. Are you ready to rewrite your own story?